change, and I am extremely elated right now at this moment because I have none other than Komorebi, or should I say Tarana Marwah, because I'm totally going to talk to her as Tarana today. But then, of course, we all know her better as Komorebi. Hi.
Hi, how are you doing, Vijayalakshmi?
Oh, very well. How are you doing?
I'm good, I'm good. I'm happy we finally got to organize this call because both of us have been trying and it's been impossible seemingly.
Yes, but I think they call it the third time lucky for the right reasons, because this is literally the third time that we've been planning to put this in place, and finally we made it. So far, so good. First of all, lady, let me just firstly begin by congratulating on the stellar 2021 that you've had, because you're one of those few musicians um, who, of course, right now is already making waves with the release of a new single, Chanda. But what a year has it been for you with the kind of reception that Bombay Begums has received? The music that you made for Bombay Begums, it's totally out of this world, and an exceptional feat for a woman to pull up. But of course, I'm not going to associate the gender with you over here, but because clearly you made your mark in the OTT space for a while now, because first it started with Made in Heaven and now with Bombay Begins. You're going places clearly. So, how do you look at the year so far?
It's been a very, very interesting year in the sense that I've kind of had to learn how to wear different hats, and sort of like allow the education from one field to spill into the other field and see if that can happen without the stress of one field spilling into the other field. But it's been really it's been a huge learning for me because the scoring world and the indie world and the songwriting world and the cinematic world are very different, and the kind of knowledge that you gain when you work in both is very different. So I feel like this has been a milestone year for both of these avatars of myself, because I've learned so much, and there's actually so much more coming as well now after this. So this is just these two projects. I think Bombay Begums and Chanda have really set things into motion for what's to come in the future, because now I've got another project coming up for OTT called Fallen, which is entirely electronic, the score, and then there's more music from Komorebi coming out. And I'm releasing music after years, so it feels really good to be back in the game.
You know, as an artist, when your aesthetics are only so different from what is usually come to be accepted, especially in mainstream projects, especially something that goes on to define pop culture. And considering your sensibilities are very niche, how do you work about your compositions in a way that that you're also putting your voice across, but at the same time it also is something that can resonate with a huge section of the audience at large?
I think one of the ways this year that happened was that I approached songwriting in Hindi, which is something that I've never done before. Like I've always written in English because I grew up in Canada, and it comes more naturally to me to write in English. But because of the nature of the song, and because of who I was writing it for, and what it was about, I decided to pick Hindi as my primary language. And I definitely used my sensibilities in terms of like my influences in music to shape the atmosphere and environment of the track musically. So you'll notice that even though it's a Hindi song, it's still a Komorebi song. Like it's still a
Yeah.
Komorebi track, but it's just in a language that's slightly more palatable or acceptable to people, to the area I'm in. Like I'm writing music in Delhi ultimately, I'm making music in Delhi. So it's really interesting how now I always used to think that, oh, my music, if I played it outside on the road, nobody would understand what I was doing. But Chanda is it's the first time that I can actually say that, okay, every person that I can think of, whether it's my neighbor or my friend or somebody who doesn't understand, hasn't heard of Bjork or Nine Inch Nails or all of my favorite musicians, who hasn't heard these people, will still understand my song. So that was a very new thing and a really interesting world to tap into for me.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Tarana, because I think with Chanda now you've finally managed to really break through that that binary that was kind of existing there, even though it did not seem very obvious. But I think you really broke through that. You broke through the ground over there, because I feel Chanda also comes from a place where the emotion is extremely universal, because the profound grief that I think we have all witnessed for a good half of this year is something that Chanda really helps us explore. It gives us a moment to really sit down and maybe grieve again. Because to be very honest with you, I know I can say this personally, because when I lost my father 4 months back, I all happened so suddenly that I don't think so that I really had found a time for myself to sit down and process, the emotion of loss, or the emptiness that suddenly that had kind of crept into my life, because everything was happening at breakneck speed. Like, we had to fulfill formalities with different authorities, and then get the rites going, observe the mourning period, relatives, friends, all of it. I can't really recollect of a proper moment where I could actually sit down and process loss. And I think with your song, that is what for that song is did what nothing else could have for so many of us. It actually gives us a moment. While just listening to a composition, we know we can think of the ones that we have lost, the ones who have left behind something so valuable to us in their own right. So firstly, thank you for that, Tarana. Thank you for giving us that song. Thank you for giving us that moment in time for ourselves through a composition. Please accept our heartfelt gratitude. Um, I want to ask you, of course, for you also, there's the backstory is that there is um, this irreplaceable loss of your Nanaji. Uh, for our viewers who are listening, would you want to tell us more about your Nanaji, who's been a huge inspiration behind the making of Chanda?
Yeah, I just first want to say thank you for sharing that with us and with me. And I know we've spoken about it in the past, and we had our moment of connection on our first Zoom call as well when we were speaking about this. Because yes, I mean, when you're writing these songs and when you're thinking about it conceptually, you always think, oh, I'll write this and it'll connect with people, and it sort of becomes part of a process of packaging music. But then when it actually implements and you do end up connecting with people, nothing can really explain what that feels like. It's sort of an irreplaceable feeling and an irreplaceable moment. This actually taught me, it took me back to the roots of why I became an artist and why I became a musician, like in terms of connection and just connecting with people. Because I've had so many people writing in to me separately, and this had happened a couple years ago when I released my track Little One, which was also a very personal song and about my family. And something, I think there's something endearing when an artist, like, to someone else who doesn't know what is happening in an artist's life, if there's something endearing about the connection that an audience member, a listener, can share with the artist when you express yourself so purely and honestly. And you forget that sometimes, when you're an artist, you forget these things are real. Like, you forget that whatever's under the surface will shine through. So if there's depth and gravity, it will shine through. If there's reality, it will shine through. So it sort of taught me that again. And my grandfather was the inspiration, yes, because I have actually not, in the same way that there's been a latency for you, and a delay, and sort of it's been difficult to process. And I think I'm also somebody who takes a lot of time to process how I feel. Like, it takes me a lot of time to articulate my feelings as well. And I do realize a lot later that I do it musically, like it's only a couple of years later, then I'm like, oh, at that point in time you were going through this because you were writing about it. But while writing about it, I'm not really thinking about the fact that I'm going through it. So it's strange. He's been amazing. He's been a really special person in my life. He's a very respected member of our family. He started in a village, and he grew up to work in WHO. And he's the reason my mother became an artist, became a poet. And I think that the lineage of art and hard work and dedication sort of came from that part of my family. And we all really looked up to him. And he was also one of my favorite, I think he's my favorite grandparent. So yeah, I really miss him, and I wish I could talk to him. And we tried making him hear the song, but I don't know how much of it even registered. So I really wish he could see that, we're doing this for the family. It would have been a special moment for him. But regardless, I think this song has helped my entire family, including me, process and pay tribute to him, process what happened with him and pay tribute to him. So it's been very special. It's not just a release for me, it's a little bit more than that.
I don't think so. I mean, just calling it a release can do any justice to the song that you made, because uh, I think it's a very, I mean, to just use the term release now in something like this could be very belittling to the cause that, that goes behind the composition. But I think what makes it even more special of Tarana is the beautiful music video that is accompanying this composition. And I would like you to talk to us more about that. But before I get to that, I think what you so beautifully put across in the music video is how the little memoirs of, you know, that are left behind, that, literally cry out for, cry out for them to be filled, whether it was a rocking chair in the music video. And for me personally, like I also said when we did the premiere a couple of weeks back, for me, it is the sofa that screams the absence of my father. I think so many little things that are left behind, all these fond remembrances of our loved ones that get left behind, that claim a certain sense of belongingness. Um, and it's so, all of this emotion itself is so beautifully encaptured in the music video. So how would you, would you want to tell us about how did that come into place?
It started with a phone call, that I had a phone call with one of my friends, Vedabrata Rao, and I told him about the song and the concept. And then I was like, like we basically conceptualized this over the phone, in the sense we started talking about like what if we showed a city being lit up by the spirits of our loved ones. And then when I brought this concept to Arushi, the animator, she basically, then a second discussion started with her, and then we decided, how do we basically, I was like, how do you tell the story of a person who's not there? How do you draw a portrait of a person who's not there anymore? And then we realized the only way to remember somebody really, after they're gone, is by looking at their things, like looking at their possessions that are still in the room, that are still in the house, that populate a room. And you can build a story and build a character using those things. So then our idea was to have three different houses and three different parallel stories running side by side, and then using those stories to create a portrait of everybody who's not there. And then it was really beautifully sort of juxtaposed and cross faded with the spirits coming out. Then we decided to connect these two ideas by having the spirits coming out of the possessions and ultimately joining together to form the moon, because our main theme was darkness versus light, like loss, grief versus hope, past and
Yeah.
future, life and death. So we wanted to show both of these things, and not have a very dark tone to the video, but just a very real, like a depiction of life, like what life is. So
Tarana, I was discussing with a friend a couple of days back about the electronica maestros that we have in our country, and when it came to the women, I could only think of two or three names that I could count on my fingertips, including you. So, firstly, I want to get at as to why, in your opinion, is there such a huge disparity? Like when we have to talk about the male electronica artists out there, I mean, of course, you can think of emerging and established names, but when it comes to the women, like I said, they are only select names that we can think of. Why do you think is the margin huge here?
I think it's just something that's not been. I think India is a baby country, so there are many such things that are newer. And I do think there are electronic artists, like there are women who dabble in synths. It's just that they're not given at the moment. They're not being given that moment of limelight or spotlight. But that's changing now, because I believe all these major platforms, streaming platforms, or people like you, you're giving artists a voice now. And I think it's a matter of time. Like, I think that it's something that's actually changing now. And I also think that I agree with you that there aren't that many um, female artists in the electronic realm. But I mean, the way the people before me sort of paved the path for me to, and I looked at them and I thought, okay, I can do this. The more of us that there are doing things like this, I think the more will be created. So it's a snowball effect, and it's just a matter of inspiration and believing that you can do it. And I think that more and more people are now. Believe you me, like maybe in the next couple of years or so, you're going to see an explosion in the electronic field with women. I'm positive of this. Like, I'm sure of it.
I'm sure this huge sense of positivity also comes from the fact that you are really surrounded by a very thick bunch of friends who are also very esteemed names in the indie business themselves. I mean, just recently, uh, Abhilasha Sinha, an acclaimed singer-songwriter in her own right, and also your best friend from school, I believe. I think she was, listed on. She was plastered all over the at Times Square, as part of the radar lineup by Spotify. And I just saw these really sweet exchange of stories and support between you, her, and Kamakshi Khanna. And I was like, wow, I think this is what um, the sisterhood at large in the music business needs, for more women, to come out there and put out the music that they want to. I mean, how does that happen? It's just, I'm sure it's not because, oh, because y'all are friends, y'all have known each other and y'all have been through thick and thin together, but also it's because you recognize the potential in each other's music.
Yeah, definitely. I think Abhilasha, Kamakshi, and I have been working together for maybe 10 plus years. And we've all had moments of doubt with ourselves, with our own identities. We've had fights with each other in terms of how to, because when you're in a band, it gets difficult. There are conflicting needs, conflicting desires for the plan forward. So, but the thing is that you kind of work through that. And I think we've all really believed in each other a lot. And there's also, in the sense, like, I wouldn't say this about too many people, but with these two, definitely, there's this unwavering sense of unconditional love that's there. So any achievement is received with a lot of, like, we're very happy for each other. Like, when we do well, we all feel happy for each other, which is a very genuine and real feeling for us. I don't I don't know how far I can extend this feeling of unconditional support and love, but for these two, definitely it's there. Like, it's only because it's been so long, like, and who doesn't want to see their friends doing well? They're more than my friends, they're my sisters at this point.
But if I may ask you to also, kind of give a hack tip to some of the amazing women out there who are excelling in, pursuing music independently, who could you think of?
So many, it's endless now. There's Sanaya, there's Ramya, there's Mali, there's Kavya, there's Palpi Shilpi, who's also doing electronic music.
Yeah.
There's I mean, there are many artists that I appreciate, but yeah, these ones I listen to their music also. So and I'm sure there are more, if I'm not recalling, like, there are more, but yeah.
Tarana, of course, I cannot end this interview without asking you, for so many of us, when we ventured into something as newcomers, relative newcomers, but people especially who are just emerging names in the genre, when you get to collaborate with people who have been doing it for years together, and I'm talking about your collaborations with Gaurav Rena and with Karsh Kale, how does it feel? I mean, what is the difference between the two? What are the big learnings from them as collaborators that you've come to imbibe in your process?
Gaurav has been a mentor for me. Like he's taught me a lot about production. So I've learned a lot by watching him produce music. Him and there's this other artist friend of mine named Curtain Blue, so Abhishek. And I've learned a lot just by watching them produce, and he's obviously seasoned and he's a stalwart and he's been doing this for maybe 30 odd years now. So it's very educational. Like more than anything else, it's very educational and very encouraging for me. And Karsh, who is also very close friends with Gaurav. So I know Karsh and Ankur through Gaurav. They're just extremely inspiring individuals in the sense in what they've done, like in the kind of history that they've made in the space of music. So it's very, very inspiring to just be around them and talk to them because they always have something. Their inputs are very valuable to me. Just as a younger artist and somebody who needs, like, sometimes we need people to guide us, because sometimes doing this alone does get a little bit, you are bound to make mistakes in this field. It's all, there's no guidebook for how to do it correctly, but it does get exponentially easier when there are people who have been around the block, giving you tips and giving you guidelines. So they've been very, very, very helpful to me in that regard.
Well, lastly, Tarana, what is in the pipeline for you? I'm sure that I suppose you're working on the next season of Made in Heaven, and there's also your album also, which has been in the pipeline for some time. But what's the status on that here?
Yeah, there's a Made in Heaven season 2, which is probably going to be coming out early next year, I think. There's Fallen, and for my work, there's my album. I have another song that I'm looking at. I've actually recently been, I mean, this is just the first time I'm even mentioning it, but I've recently been reading up and feeling feeling inspired to write again about the current situation in Kabul, in Afghanistan. So I might be writing some music in that regard. But aside from that, yeah, there is my album. I have a song called Watch Out, which I'm going to release as a single. I'm very, very excited. There's a lot of music, and Chanda was just the start of that. There's a cycle, so I'm very, very excited for that to start now. In fact, I'm also very eager because it's been quite some time. Yeah.
Well, true to your name, I suppose your name actually means sunlight that falls through tree leaves. So just like sunlight, please keep radiating the magic of your music. And all I can say is I wish you all the best, Tarana, and thank you so much for joining us today on Indie Exchange. And I hope that the next time I get to interact with you, it's not through Zoom and it's in person.
I would love to meet you in person and just talk to you about indie and outside of indie. And yeah, I hope we get to do that and the world goes back to normal. And thank you for having
Yes.
me.
Radio City.